Alrighty, and we have a level, so we're good to go.
You don't have freckles, do you?
Yeah.
I can't see them. Oh, they're different. I mean, they're
Alright.
dark like a
We
lot.
have
Yeah.
to start.
No, I don't
We're
have
late.
dark.
We're late.
See how
I am.
my freckles?
I am apologetic
on your
to
arms.
our online folks. We are a little bit late starting. My apologies to you. I had to also prepare for music, so it took me a little longer than I should have. Today, Will, I'm sure you'll extend to me mercy because we're talking about mercy extended. Oh, what a segue that was, right? Well, we'll be looking at Matthew chapter 9, not all the verses in chapter 9. There's some great verses, and I'll probably touch on the ones that they kind of skip a little bit. So have your Bibles turned to that. We'll be looking at these three areas. Jesus' mission. This is verses 10 through 13 of Matthew 9. Jesus' work, verses 14 through 17. Jesus' compassion, 18 through 19. And we're going to skip over to 23 and through 26 for Jesus' power. And for those of you who do follow along in our study book, we're in session number 8, page 77 through 86. And our main idea today is that Jesus shows mercy to all who come to him in faith. We have a couple additional verses, and I think we'll try to get to those. Romans 5:8 and Mark 9:12 as well. So let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time we have to study your word. I just pray that it will be something that will help us in our lives as Christians, Lord. That you will show us and be in our hearts, Lord, that what mercy really means and how your Son extended that to all people, and we should do as well. Thank you. In your Son's precious name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
And be with the people that are still traveling to get here, and those across the country that are dealing with snowmageddon. Not here though. In the Northwest, we're avoiding the snow. We have cold weather, but that's about it.
We've got a Pineapple Express coming.
Pineapple Express. Yeah. No, I think we got everything. So mercy extended is the title, like I said, and we're going to be looking at this here today. Well, if we're going to be talking about mercy, well, I'll wait till that for a second here. Let's look at the introduction here. In our handouts today, and again, as I've said before, our handouts are available to everyone. Those of you online can also get a copy sent to your email address. Just let our pastor know, Pastor Matthew Ellis, and he at Grace Baptist Church here in Vancouver, Washington, and he will be glad to add you to the mailing list so you can have a copy of my wonderful handout. The dreaded handout. Anyway, we're on page 1 of the handout, of handout 1, page 1, where it says intro paragraph. It's also in our study book, by the way. Excuse me, on page 77. And it reads thusly: suffering is everywhere. That's true, right? Hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, wildfires are in the news frequently. Add to that cancer, heart disease, dementia, broken relationships. Overlooking the suffering of others is easy to do when each of us is facing our own form of suffering, right? We often neglect to extend compassion to others when we ourselves need compassion. Thankfully, Jesus never overlooks the suffering we face. He shows compassion and mercy to all who come to him. And let me see. What are some words that come to mind when you hear the word mercy? What words come to mind when you hear the word mercy?
Compassion.
Compassion. Yeah, it's like a synonym for it, right?
Yeah.
What's any other words come? Empathy. I like that. Empathy. Yeah. Empathy. And I would include empathy with action. Yeah. You know, we do need to have action with all these things. Otherwise, it's just empty words, right? Okay. Anything else come to mind? No. So one Bible dictionary defines it this way. I think it's the Holman Bible Dictionary. Says that mercy is one's consideration of the condition and needs of his or her fellow men or women. and that's a good, just a one sentence thing, but we can do a little better than that, right? You look at page 2 of handout number 1. At the very bottom, it says mercy. Mercy is the gift of God's undeserved kindness and compassion towards us, by the way. That's what that means. Mercy encompasses the idea of alleviating suffering and extending kindness, especially to those who are in distress or perhaps maybe unworthy of that kind of grace. The Hebrew word is chesed. And I'm not sure I pronounced it right, but that's okay. Nobody here speaks Hebrew, so they can't check me. Chesed, which is C-H-E-S-E-D. And that Hebrew word just basically implies love and loyalty. Of course, in the New Testament, we are talking about Greek, right? So in Greek, the term, when you see the English word mercy, it's the Greek term eleos. E-L-E-O-S. That's the phonetic spelling, of course. I don't spell or talk in Greek, so that's close pretty good. But it denotes compassion. A good illustration is in Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan. That Good Samaritan showed compassion on the injured Jewish man. Samaritans and Jews don't have dealings with each other. But yet, the Samaritan man, who'd probably been put upon by many Jewish people in the past, saw this injured Jewish man and he felt what? Compassion. He felt pity. Pity's not a good word, by the way. He extended mercy to him. He went to that man when no one else would. The Jewish people all passed him on the side of the road. Samaritan, though, who shouldn't have dealt with him at all, went up to this man. He cleansed his wounds. He anointed his wounds with oil. He bound them up so they wouldn't be bleeding out. And he took him to a inn, and he paid in advance for the care of this man. That's what the Good Samaritan did. He extended mercy, didn't he?
Yes.
That was a very good illustration of that. Now, of course, the parable's main part is to show the hypocrisy of the Jewish people who wouldn't even help the person. The person you didn't expect to help did. But regardless, that's a good illustration.
And the person that wanted it, he accepted the help. Or the person accepted the help.
Well, that's true. Of course, I don't know if he was really at the beginning in a kind of condition to reject it.
Exactly.
It sounds like he'd been beaten up pretty bad and left for dead, essentially.
Yep.
But yes, I'm sure he was more than grateful for that compassion that was shown to him. Another question asked here is, in what ways can we show mercy in our everyday encounters? Now, it may not be as dramatic as the Good Samaritan, of course, but what are some ways that we can extend mercy in our everyday encounters that you can think of?
A smile.
Hey, Steve. A smile, okay. Somebody maybe needs a smile, right? Maybe they need some positive affirmation. They're getting a lot of negative, getting a lot of cold pricklies, not any warm fuzzies. That's what we used to call it in the Air Force. The smile would fall into the warm fuzzies. Right? It's good to have positive affirmation. That's what you're talking about, right? Along with a smile, maybe words of encouragement, right? What else we think of?
Just a nice gesture, I guess.
Nice gesture, okay.
Try to understand,
Okay.
I guess.
Understand whatever situation they're into. Maybe they fell into some sort of a situation where maybe they have a hard time getting out of now. They could be homeless. They could be drug addicted. We don't know.
Maybe you're the only person,
Yeah.
that they've talked to.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know.
And I've mentioned this before as an act like you were talking about, where my wife and I bought lunch for this lady, and she wasn't begging. She was just sitting there with her little thing of French fries and a glass of water at the Burger King. We bought her a meal, and it really affected the lady who took the order. She was almost in tears. So that was neat to see that not only did that person get helped, but the other person saw what was happening and understood what mercy might be. Anyway, but yeah, so those are some everyday ways we can show mercy, right? So we're going to look at how Jesus also extended mercy. I think, I forgot to read Romans 5:8. Romans 5:8. Now, in our handouts, I have it under additional verses on the second page of handout 1. Romans 5:8. But God demonstrates his own love to us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Did we do anything that deserved Christ dying for us?
On the contrary.
No, we didn't. We deserved judgment. Instead, he extended to us mercy and grace, right? So that is the ultimate right there. Is even though the person doesn't deserve it, they're getting this mercy extended to them, and that's a good thing, isn't it? I'm glad that he did that for me. So We've been studying the Gospel of Matthew. Up to this point, Matthew has not mentioned himself, which is not uncommon, by the way. A lot of authors will talk about themselves sometimes in a third person kind of way, because they don't want to say, I did this and I did. So they will talk about it in a way that's kind of more humble, you might say. Maybe that's the right way to say it. It's a literary way of doing things. But he is going to mention himself here in these verses. And let's see. Even though he was one of Jesus' early disciples, this is the first time he actually mentions himself in this narrative. And we have something called Understanding the Context in our book. And it's on page 78. And it has some good points. I'm going to take a few moments to read this, or I might skip through it. Anyways, one of the features of Matthew, Mark, and Luke is the repeated references to Jesus' authority. Of course, those are called what do they call it? Synoptic Gospels. That's right, Synoptic Gospels. And Matthew uses the word authority 9 different times. For example, if you look at Matthew chapter 7, it says, following 3 chapters of authoritative teaching, chapters 8 through 9, which is what we're in right now, contain stories of Jesus' authoritative power and healing. And we talked about healing before. What is healing? Healing is what? It's a miracle. It's what they call an attesting miracle. Why is it an attesting miracle? I talked about this a little bit last week, so you have to lean backwards a little bit and think about that. What is it attesting to?
His power.
His power, yeah, and also to the fact, and Matthew's really keen on this because he was after that Jewish person. It's attesting to this is what the prophet said Messiah would do. Oh, behold, Jesus is doing it.
Right.
Yeah, how about that? You know, how about that, ladies and germs? He's doing those things. So that's those are attesting miracles. So in each narrative of healing, the compassion and mercy of Jesus is the predominant feature, which is what we're talking about today. Chapter 9 begins with the story considered in last week's study of the paralyzed man brought in by Jesus' 4 friends. Immediately following that narrative, the writer of the gospel gives us a glimpse into his own calling to be a disciple. While Mark and Luke also record the calling of Matthew, in those 2 gospels he is called Levi. Levi was his other name. And there's a very common thing. Simon had 2 names. We know him mostly by Peter, right? Simon Peter, right? Well, this is Matthew or Levi. Levi was his Hebrew name. Matthew was his Greek name. He was a tax collector. He worked for the Roman government.
Yeah.
That terrible Roman government. He was a collaborator. You'd think he was looked kindly upon by the regular Jews in that day and age. No, he was not. He was not. So he was somebody that you'd expect not to be called to follow a Jewish rabbi, right? Would you expect that person to be called? No. You look for the most pious, religious Pharisee of the Pharisees you could, you know. Maybe Saul of Tarsus would be a good one before he became converted, right? Somebody like that, right? So anyway, but he mentions the fact that he was sitting in the tax collector's officer booth in verse 9. It would identify him as one of the most likely that collected taxes from the many commercial boats that landed at the shore area near Capernaum. Many of these boats were owned by Gentiles. Thus, Matthew was despised not only because he was a tax collector, but also as one he was defiled by the frequent contacts with Gentiles that he had. So that was an added thing to him. Not only did he collaborate with the enemy, the occupier, but he actually talked and dealt and touched the things that Gentiles touched. Whoa! So no doubt Matthew included the story of his calling to point to the fact that Jesus extended grace, even to those considered to be outcasts. So Matthew was an outcast. Within his own country, he was an outcast. After his calling, Matthew gave a banquet in honor of Jesus. This banquet contributed to a growing conflict between the religious leaders and Jesus. We'll talk about that a little bit. Following the confrontation with the Pharisees, Jesus performed additional acts of compassion, including the healing of a chronically ill woman and the resurrection of a young girl from the dead, giving sight to 2 blind men and delivering a demon-possessed man. Verses 18 to 34. Chapter 9 concludes with a summary statement of the compassionate healing ministry of Jesus. Now that's the thumbnail sketch, so we're done. No, not done. We're going to get a little more depth here as we talk about mercy being extended. Excuse me. as we study the verses today, focus on how Jesus showed mercy and how he wants us to follow his example. Why was Jesus on the earth? He was testifying about the Father and about the kingdom, right? He was showing people that this was the way that God wants you to live, right? And how you can be with him eternally. And so he is all about helping those people to know that. And many times there's barriers in our lives. Sometimes they're physical barriers, right? Sometimes in these cases, these people we're going to be talking about, maybe they had some ailment or something that stopped them. Jesus was removing those barriers. He was healing those people of those infirmities, those problems and things they had in their lives, so they could more clearly understand and follow him. But primarily, he wanted to show the Jewish people that this is what Messiah will do. I'm doing it. Remember, we talked about that last week or the week before, about in Isaiah, several verses that he talks about him. Messiah would come. You'd know the Messiah because he'd be doing what?
The works of his Father.
Yeah, but he'd be healing people.
Yes.
Yeah. He'd heal people of their physical infirmities and their spiritual problems. And that's exactly what he was doing. So you think this would impress the Jewish people who knew those verses? Why, yes it would. Let's look at the first one here. Actually, I misspoke. I'm going to read first verse before that. In Matthew chapter 9, we're in Matthew chapter 9. I'm going to start in verse 9 here. It says, Jesus went from there, okay, from where he was previously to that. He saw a man called Matthew, or Levi, sitting in the tax collector's booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. That's interesting. Wait a minute. You know who I am, I'm a tax collector. You want me? You're. No, he didn't say that stuff. He said, "Okay."
Yeah.
Do you think that was an interesting act for this person to do? Here he had a successful business. This was his security. I mean, we're talking about a person who probably kept the idea of money close to his heart, right? And yet he got up.
You kind of wonder if it was the Spirit.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. But we also do see that there are others who were admonished that they should follow him, and they couldn't. The rich young ruler went away shaking his head because he had many things, and so he couldn't do those things. Anyway, so that kind of leads us into who Matthew was and what he was doing, and Jesus just called him. So let's look at the first verses 10 through 13. And for the first 4 verses, I want you to listen for the direct quotes that you see in this passage. Who has number 1?
I do.
All right, number 1.
Okay, Matthew 9, 10 through 13. Then it happened that as Jesus was reclining at the table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were dining with Jesus and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why is your teacher eating with the tax collectors and sinners?" But when Jesus heard this, he said, "It is not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire compassion and not sacrifice. For I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners."
Ooh. So what's interesting is, even at this early point in his ministry, who is it that's the antagonist for Jesus?
The Pharisees.
The Pharisees. Yeah, because they had already heard rumblings about what was going on up in that place that's near all the Gentiles live, Galilee. Galilee is always suspicious, right? And in our map here, I don't think you can see it online. I think you can barely see it. The Sea of Galilee, and so he was doing many of these things in this area around here. They believe that he was approximately in this area near Capernaum, Bethsaida, when he called Levi, also known as Matthew, Simon, also known as Peter, and Andrew, John, and James. So this is the area he probably was in at the time. And down, I wish I had a bigger map. It shows us Jerusalem is down here somewhere. And they'd heard this stuff, and they probably sent some Pharisees up to check this guy out. A rabbi is teaching what? Go check it out. You know, something like that was probably happening. So they were already trying to figure out what's going on with this man named Jesus. And we see that he was doing, first of all, he called Matthew, and then allusion is that after that, I think in some of the other accounts it talks more about this in detail. I forgot which one I read that in. But apparently he went to his house. So he was reclining at the table at Matthew's house. Now reclining at the table, we think of eating at the table, we sit, I tell my grandkids, sit up straight, guys, because they're like, all over the place, right? I sit up straight, but they didn't do that. The table was a low table, really low, and they had these cushions, and you take a cushion, you kind of lean on the cushion, and you'd eat your food. I know it's awkward, sounds weird, but they would see us and say, what do you do? So you see Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, and they're all sitting at the table, and they're looking at him. No, it didn't happen that way. Hate to throw mud on Leonardo's little thing, or I think it was Leonardo da Vinci.
I think you're right.
I can't remember who did the Last Supper. I think it was him. Any case, it's a nice picture. I love the picture. Don't get me wrong. It's just that they didn't do it that way. It's a very Asian type of thing. So he's doing this, right? And of course he had his buddies with him. Who are some of his buddies, do you think? Who would hang around with Matthew or Levi the tax collector?
Other tax collectors.
Other tax collectors. Who else? Maybe. It specifically says a word. Sinners.
Yeah.
Whoa. Now, who would be sinners? The Pharisees and the Sadducees, the elders, would probably look at anybody who didn't meticulously follow the law, right? Maybe they ate unclean foods. Maybe they had an occupation where they touched dead things or something like that. It could have been many, many things like this. It could be people involved in crime somehow. Might be people of ill repute. Maybe, things like that. We don't know exactly the classification, but they are considered sinners. So these people were probably not the ones you'd think about who would be sitting down with Franklin Graham or some big well-known pastor or something like that, the Pope, whoever it might be. Normally you wouldn't think that people would be, that person would be associated with him, right? But Jesus did. Jesus, who had within him the Word of God, who was trying to share with others what it meant to honor God, to be part of God's family, went to these people that the others no, I don't want to deal with that. The others, the Jewish people would go around, just to avoid going through Samaria. They would go like many miles out of their way, because we don't have Samaria on the map here. But to go through Samaria was a bad thing. You wouldn't walk through that area because that's where the half-breeds lived. And so you didn't do that. So they go way around if they had to go to another place up there instead of going straight through Samaria. That's how bad it was with the fact that they felt that way about people who were sinners. And through no fault of their own, by the way. I mean, somebody who's a descendant of those people, they didn't have anything to do with what they did. Yet they treated it that way as well. And so, you can understand the Pharisees now. They see this rabbi who is supposed to be somebody who's pious and religious and right, and he's doing what?
He's eating and reclining at the table with these tax collectors.
The undesirables.
Yeah. He's sitting down with them. He's sitting down with them. Understand what that means. And he's eating with them. Now, when you did that in the Middle East, and the same thing today, it means you were what?
Communing.
You're almost agreeing with them.
Yeah.
In their life.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You agree with them.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of attitude.
Yeah. You're not condemning them.
You're condoning what they do.
You're in a sense, in a way, it appears that you're condoning them because you're eating with them. So, I mean...
They're okay. I'm sitting and eating with them.
There's an old adage about laying down with fleas or something. I can't remember how that goes. And that kind of feeling is you're with the riffraff. You're with the people that you shouldn't be with, You're a rabbi. What's wrong with you? So they're saying these things. Why? And the funny thing is they're not addressing Jesus here. It says, why is your teacher eating with the tax collectors and sinners?
That is interesting.
Right.
Why is he doing that?
They wouldn't talk directly to him. He would talk to his disciples.
Yeah. interesting point
That
there.
is.
Uh-huh. So
Almost like
Jesus
spiritual.
was basically being a friend to sinners. Think about that. I'm glad he's a friend of sinners. Because while I was yet a sinner, he died for me. Before I even knew him, he had done this for me, right? Same for all of us, right? So thank goodness he did, okay? Because they misunderstood the scriptures. They misunderstood the prophecies that talked about Jesus and who Jesus was and what his purpose of coming was. They had made it into this caricature, basically. Well, when Jesus comes, he's going to come, well, not Jesus. When the Messiah finally comes, he's going to come with a big army and he's going to kick out the Romans and everybody else, and we're going to be just like we were in Solomon's day, big and in charge, and everybody's going to bow down to us. That's what their view of one of the views. There's a two. Go ahead.
It's funny that they asked why, but they didn't really care why.
Why he was doing that?
Why? Yeah, why?
Yeah, they were condemning him.
Right.
With that
Exactly.
statement.
They were judging him.
Yeah.
They didn't really want to know why. They didn't care.
No, they wanted everybody else to see what they were doing.
They were using it to point out the fact that this guy, he's sitting there with the sinners.
Look at him, not us.
Yeah. Well, they didn't think they had any problems, though. They didn't think they had any problems. But Jesus heard this, okay? So they probably were whispering it loudly, Why? Just because they weren't trying to poke the bear or what? I don't know what they're trying to do, why they did it this way, but they didn't have to whisper because Jesus knew their hearts anyway. And he says something very important now. He says, "Is not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick." In other words, the healthy don't need a physician, right? They don't need to be healed of anything, but the sick do. But go and learn what this means. I desire compassion and not sacrifice. For I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Now, the curious thing here is, of course, the Pharisees thought they were the righteous. They had no sin in them, right? And so they were thinking, you're for these people, apparently, is what they were thinking. They weren't thinking the next step. Well, who is a sinner? Well, we all are.
Yeah.
Right? We all have committed sin. So none of us are clean in that sense. It's interesting, he did quote a verse here too. Did you catch that verse?
No.
Let's see, where did I get my papers? Main verses, commentary. There's additional verses. He quotes Hosea 6:6, which is another prophet, of course, and he's talking about what God desires, okay? It says, Hosea quotes God, I guess. "For I delight in loyalty rather than sacrifice, and in the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings." Now what Hosea is trying to communicate here, is God told him, was it's what the heart is, not what you're doing externally.
Yeah.
Where is your heart? Is your heart for God, or is your heart for yourself? So essentially that's what he's saying here. So that's Jesus quoting Hosea to them. And they should have known Hosea. They did know Hosea. He quoted this to them. Do we see much else there? I don't think they had anything else to say, did they? It's very curious, right? So okay, we talked about what it means for Jesus to be a friend of sinners. What does it look like for his followers to be friends of sinners? What about us, right? Are we his followers?
Yes.
We are his followers. So how should we be a friend of sinners? What do you think? Compassion. For those who need compassion. For those who other people would look away from and say, I don't want anything to do with that person over there. That person's too dirty. He smells funny. She acts weird. Whatever it might be. We should be willing to go alongside those people when they need compassion, when they need mercy, to help them. And it's not an easy thing to do.
No,
it's a
not.
hard thing to do. But when God speaks to us to do it, and I don't know if you've ever gone through this before, I have, don't turn back from it. You should do it. Boy, a couple times I've turned back on it, and later I said, why did I do that? I missed something there. I know I missed something there. I should have been more compassionate to that situation. But anyway, so be looking for those. Those are divine appointments, I call them. There are times when God's speaking to our hearts. Are we going to be obedient or not?
Well, that's the key, for
Yes.
God to speak to our
Yes.
hearts.
Yes. As Christians, we should have a heart that's ready to listen to that, right?
Yes.
So anyway, in verse 10, a large number of tax collectors and sinners were probably attending the banquet at Matthew's invitation. Matthew was thrilled to be following Jesus, even at this point, right? So thrilled. He said, I'm going to have a big party. I want you all to come. An uninvited party, an uninvited can be these Pharisees, by the way. And another thing to remember is it's not like our houses today. Most of the houses today, you have this door, you have these windows, and you come in, you close the door, and nobody can see what's going on or know what's going on. They didn't have it that way. It was open. There was no air conditioning. So they would have a portio or porch area, and everything would be open, so air could flow through. As there's, like I said, no air conditioning. And so when you had a party, people would come along and see what's going on. They'd like sit on the thing and watch and listen and say, "Wow, look at that person over there. He's over there too. How come I didn't get an invitation?" And so you could talk back and forth. It was much more open than we think of today. So this is what's going on, probably, my guess. Something like that. Anyway, a large number of tax collectors and sinners were probably attending the banquet at Matthew's invitation. Matthew wanted his colleagues and friends to know Jesus as he now knew him. Isn't that a neat thing? Isn't that a neat thing? How we know Jesus. Don't we want to share that? We should want to share that.
Yes.
We should have that fresh love for Jesus to tell others about what Jesus did for us, right? Mm-hmm. What better way for that to happen than for Matthew to invite both Jesus and Matthew's colleagues into his house, and by extension, of course, Jesus' disciples that he has been calling, right? So Jesus was eating with them and explained to them about the kingdom of heaven. That was his purpose for doing that. Let's see. Handout number 912. Did we do 912? 912. Yes, we did. Oh, that's our key verse. Ta-da! Key verse. It's also in our handouts. I think I included it as handout number 2. Yeah. So this is also by the memory verse. It's a real good verse to memorize. It's not very long. Easy. It is not those who are well who need a doctor. This is a different translation of the I just read. But those who are sick. And that's a very true statement, right? Jesus is trying to point something out to the Pharisees here. And I don't think they got it entirely. But eventually they did understand, because in later accounts they realized, he's talking about us. We're sinners? Wait a minute. We're children of Abraham. What do you mean? We're sinners. It hit them between the eyes later on, and they were really offended. I think some of us went over there and, what was that? I don't know. Let's look at the next one, though. Jesus' work. Okay, we talked about Jesus' mission. His mission was to do what? Help those who are needing help, which is everybody, right? But he specifically talked about those who in our world need mercy. And of course, we needed mercy when he saved us, right? In number 2, we're talking about Jesus' work now. In these next 4 verses, I want you to listen for the images that Jesus used to make his point. What kind of images do you see him using? Who has number 2 for me?
I do.
Could you read that for us, Sharon?
Then the disciples of John came to him, asking, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, "The attendants of the bridegroom cannot mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them, can they? But the days come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. But no one puts a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch pulls away from the garment, and a worse tear results. Nor do people put new wine into old wineskins, otherwise the wineskins burst, and the wine pours out, and the wineskins are ruined. But they put new wine into fresh wineskins, and both are preserved."
Mm-hmm. So he's using a couple of interesting examples to answer these disciples of John. Now, the disciples of John, who were they? We don't know exactly who they were, but there was many disciples of John. And remember, John was this like Old Testament prophet, one of the last ones. I know it was in the New Testament he talks about John the Baptist, but he was in that mode, right? He looked like a wild guy. He lived in the wilderness. He had strange clothes on. He smelled funny. He ate weird things, And so his followers kind of followed that kind of thing. And for that. Aestheticism. I'm not sure. Where was that? I saw that. I'm not going to find it. But they were following those kind of things, and that was kind of become a ritual to them. Okay, they were doing it thinking that God would be pleased that I'm acting this in a strange way. It's like people who would put on sackcloth and ashes and a frown face when they're sad. Look at me! Look, I'm doing this thing, physical thing. So aren't I pious? Some of John's disciples had gotten into that mode. I think at this point John might have been already taken by Herod. I'm not sure. But anyway, they had questions of him. And one of the things they would do, they would follow the religious rituals of fasting. What is fasting?
That can mean different things today.
Okay, back then, how about that?
It's depriving yourself of something that you would usually do in the context of spiritual
Discipline.
discipline.
Yeah, and what they would commonly do is they would put a sad face on, and they put on some rumpled clothes, and they say, I'm fasting for the Lord. Jesus said not to do that, remember? He said don't do those external things, because those external things don't matter. What matters is the heart. And I should have found that verse that talks about that when he's confronting hypocrisy. And they would do these things at certain times. There are certain times they would do a certain fast for the purposes of showing God how humble they were by doing these things, which actually was kind of the reverse.
And in the same moment doing the look at me, I'm fasting.
Exactly. And it was kind of funny how they would do that. They did the same thing when they gave offerings. They would say, look at me, look at all the money. You know, they would do that in front of people. They do that when they're praying. They'd stop at a street corner right around time of prayers and wait. In the time of prayers, they would proclaim their prayers to anyone who could listen on all the, it was kind of funny how they would do these things. But Jesus didn't admonish them for doing false things like this, okay? But he wants them to understand why his disciples are not fasting. Why are they not fasting? They should be fasting. We fasted because John showed us how to do that, but yours don't. And Jesus used what was some of the illustrations he used?
Actually, before you go further, in the book it says, in the book, the study book, there's a it says there are over 70 references to fasting in the Bible. Both the Old and New Testaments teach its value.
Yes. The value for fasting, if you do it correctly, is not to do it to get attention from men.
Yes, that's
others,
correct.
but to cause yourself to concentrate on
The Lord.
the Lord.
Yeah.
I think Steve said that earlier.
Yeah.
And so that's the first. So is it wrong to fast? No, I never said that. It's wrong to fast the wrong reasons.
Okay.
Yeah. It shouldn't be, well, I'm fasting for the Lord as I try to lose weight. No.
Or make a show out of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the whole point right there.
Okay.
Yes, so thank you for bringing that up, but yes, definitely fasting is not frowned upon in the Bible, so I'm not saying don't fast.
Okay.
Definitely, if that's what you're being called to do, for reasons of sharpening your spiritualness towards God in a certain area. Let's say you're trying to decide on a very important thing. You want to know God's will for you, and part of it might be getting rid of distractions in your life for a period of time. That would be part of the fasting thing. You would not go and do all these other things. You would just primarily focus on God, even to the extent of putting food aside for a while. Jesus fasted when he was tempted in the wilderness, right? But the followers of Jesus at this time are not fasting. Why are you not fasting? Shouldn't you be fasting like everybody else does? That's what he's saying. Get on the fasting train with us.
Okay. Thank you.
And so he answers that, says the example of what? The first example was, there's three examples. Let's just hit the examples. What's the first example he uses? I think somebody mentioned it already. A wedding, right?
Yep.
Talks about a wedding, the attendance of the bridegroom and all that stuff. What's the second one we see?
Repairing clothes.
Yeah, a garment. Right. Yeah.
Garment.
And the third one is something we don't know how much about today, but wineskins.
Yeah.
What the heck is a wineskin?
Big sack.
It's usually, they take like a goat after they've, done all the things to the goat, and they'll basically tie off the things, the skin of the goat. They tie those things off and they fill it with wine, in the way of keeping the wine in a container. And that's how they did that. So that's where that's coming from. And the wineskins, when they first began that, were pliable. Okay, so you put the wine in and put the wine aside,
Fermentation.
and it
would
ferments a
allow
little
it to
bit and
expand.
expands a little bit, you know, and all that stuff happens. And time goes by and the skin gets harder. And so it's a good container. They
Not
use
as
them.
pliable.
What's that?
Not as pliable.
Not as pliable, right. So that understanding that, and of course most people understand garments and what they're talking about there. But let's look at that really quick here. I know I read this. I was going to mark it. I probably didn't do it. Okay, he didn't rebuke the disciples because fasting is good practice. He used these three analogies. First, he noted that the guests of the bridegroom don't mourn while the groom remains present. Weddings are a cause for what?
Joy and celebration.
Celebration, right? Not sadness. And so fasting is kind of a way to realize what you've done and ask God's forgiveness and all that kind of stuff and sharpen your spirituality. So the idea is that we only do that right now because the bridegroom is with us. Who's the bridegroom? Jesus. So he's trying to explain to them, we're not going to be fasting right now because we're on a mission to do these things. So weddings were a cause for celebration, not sadness. The groom represented Jesus, and the wedding guests referred to all of his followers. While they were together, it was appropriate that they what? Be rejoicing, be happy, be enthusiastic, and all that. However, the time would come when the bridegroom would be taken. We know that, right? The term taken connotes being led away involuntarily. It says neither Jesus' disciples nor John's followers understood that he was referring to his death on the cross at that point. It says at that time, they will fast. At that time, you're going to be fasting. Like John's disciples who grieved over his imprisonment, so apparently John had been in prison at this time, Jesus' disciples would mourn for him as well. The metaphor would also include Jesus' departure back to heaven when his disciples would no longer enjoy his physical presence like they did. What's the second analogy? Clothing. So an old garment will develop holes, right? It always has because of wear and tear. But, you know, don't have a lot of money. You can't go up to Forever 21 or whatever the Old Navy store is because they didn't have those. They had to make do sometimes.
Old Navy to buy your new garment.
Yeah. Old Navy. But they didn't have those kind of things, and a lot of people didn't have the money. So they would do what? They'd patch the hole. They'd put another piece of material over it. Such cloth was often made of wool and needed to be washed before being applied, so it would shrink to its permanent size. Without the shrinking process, the cloth would pull away from the old garment and make the hole of the tear worse. So they tried to incorporate these old trappings of ritualistic religion with the fresh spirit of Christ, and it would damage both. So in some ways, John's disciples have been trying to follow the teachings of John while clinging to the old rituals of the scribes and Pharisees. They didn't yet comprehend the totally new relationship with God that Jesus made possible. Mixing this new and old was often detrimental to both. Okay, what about wineskins? Similar to that. Wineskins were made from animal skins, we talked about that already, that grew hard and brittle over time. Fresh wine would ferment, creating gases would expand and cause the skins to burst if you used an old wineskin. This old wineskin is not going to be flexible. It's old, right? So what happens when new wine goes in there? Boom! You got a mess. And so people know this. So he's using things that they know in their life. Consequently, both would be lost. The wine would run out, and the wineskins would be ruined. So the analogy of the old and new cloth is just very similar to that. This illustration showed the problem of trying to combine the old and the new, the old covenant and the new covenant. People knew to pour new wine into fresh new wineskins. In the same way, the new covenant of Christ needed a fresh container. That fresh container was the church. It says we can rejoice in the truth that salvation is not based on religious works or rituals. That's what John's followers were clinging to. He was taken away in jail. Think about that. They were followers. There was a lot of people who followed John. This was something that was a big, big thing. And now, they've taken him away. Herod's got him in jail, soon to be beheaded. And these people are without a leader. They're rudderless at this point. So they're searching about. So they know that John was talking about Jesus being the Messiah. So now they're coming to him and seeing. A lot of John's followers followed Jesus after this, by the way. It's an interesting thing. So he's trying to explain to them that's why we're doing that. Does that make sense? These metaphors were commonly used by rabbis and teachers. We use them all the time in our talking, right? So Jesus again never rejected fasting, like we were talking about, Cindy. as a spiritual discipline, but he did emphasize a new approach to living in a relationship with God, and this new approach stood in stark contrast to both the legalism of the Pharisees and that's the word I was looking for, the austerity of John's followers. The word austerity. That was part of that ritualistic old covenant type of righteousness. We follow this austerity program that John had laid out for them, and it was steeped in ritual. Was John a perfect person, John the Baptist? No, he was just the forerunner to tell people, right? So he was doing it to the best of his ability. And now Jesus is on the scene. Okay? Let's look at the next one. Jesus' compassion. We looked at his mission, his work. Now we're going to look at his compassion. 18 and 19. Who has number, whatever that one is? 3.
While he was saying these things to them, a synagogue official came and bowed down before him and said, "My daughter has just died. But come and lay your hands on her, and she will live." Jesus got up and began to follow him, and so did his disciples.
Okay, so here he is talking with this conversation that's really important. Trying to explain to John. John's disciples apparently were there at the same kind of confab they were doing there, or maybe it was the end of the dinner, I don't know exactly. But all this was going on, right? And then somebody says, like, excuse me. What were they doing? What did I just do? I interrupted, right? Didn't I just interrupt somebody? Yeah. How many people love to be interrupted?
I can't think of one.
I don't think of anyone that likes to be interrupted. You know, I remember when I was working in the Air Force as a shop chief, and I was busy
Unless it's good news.
doing
Yeah.
like evaluations or something like that, and I was heavy into it, and somebody has to talk to me. No, I'm on track. I'm getting this done. Oh. Okay, put it aside. Now what's your problem? You know, that's a terrible thing to do.
And then he was like, was that significant? I'm sorry.
So how do you feel about being interrupted? Do you like it? No. How do you respond to interruptions? Favorably?
Not always.
No. Now, if it's your job to be interrupted, and I worked for a time at a prison, I was in the business office, and I was always getting interrupted by people who worked there, because I was in charge of their payroll and stuff like that. And so it was like all the time, constantly. So it's kind of part of my job. But I didn't like it because I had all these deadlines. Anyway, but no, I hated that. Some interruptions might seem minor, while others seem to come at the absolute worst times, and that's so true. When we're in the middle of something important, we consider these things important, to us at least, and we've finally gotten maybe a measure of momentum going, and then you're interrupted. Yes, I hate that. Interruptions can really test our patience. That's for sure. That's for sure. Jesus had been teaching the disciples of John more about who he is and why he had come, and some synagogue official came to bother him. It was important for them to understand these things, but he got interrupted. As he was sharing these truths, a synagogue leader. Now, who was a synagogue leader? His name is Jairus. Why do we know this? Because Mark 5:22 tells us. Mark 5:22. Mark 5:22. What did I do with that one?
Right here. Hand that one.
Is it one of my other verses? I can't remember.
Yes, hand that one.
Oh, there it is. This is Mark 5:22. One of the synagogue officials named Jairus came up, and on seeing him, fell at his feet. That's Mark's account. So we know that happened, right? That is what his name was. He interrupted. So who is this person? He's a synagogue official or leader. So yeah, he's got some clout, right, at the local synagogue apparently. But he had an important thing. Master, I gotta bother you right now. My daughter's about to die. I need you to help me.
No, his daughter did die.
Well, yes, we know that later. But matter of fact, I think they sent some officials, don't bother the master, it's too late. It's too late, right? That's what they told him. Now, what did I do with that? Oh, my other verses have gone away. Oh, here they are. Yeah, in verse 18 it says, while we're saying these things, the synagogue official came and bowed down and said, your daughter has died. Okay? But guess what? Jesus extended mercy. He extended mercy, didn't he? What did he do? He got up and went there and healed him. We know that, right? When you look at this. Let's look at the last verses. Who's at number 4? Go ahead.
When Jesus entered into the official's house and saw the flute players and the crowd in noisy disorder, he said, "Leave, for the girl has not died, but is asleep." And they began laughing at him. But when the crowd had been sent out, he entered and took her by the hand, and the girl got up. This news spread throughout all that land.
And that's it. That's so Jesus, isn't it?
Yes.
He said, "I'm going to come right now," and she already died. But he said, "Don't worry,
She's just sleeping.
she's just sleeping." No, she's died. She's dead. Same thing happened, by the way, with somebody who was a close friend of Jesus. Remember that?
Lazarus.
Lazarus, yeah. Same thing. As a matter of fact, he waited until he was dead,
Yeah.
which was to show the people that Jesus had power over
And been buried.
and dead and buried.
Yes.
And there was this belief that the spirit hovered over the body for about 2-3 days. About 1 or 2 days. 1 or 2 days. But by the 3rd day, no. So he waited. In the case of Lazarus, he waited for that time to be done. So they knew that this man was dead, and yet he still came, and he cried because of all the sadness that was there. Anyway, so how would you respond to such an interruption? Jesus responded with compassion, with mercy, right? If you were Jesus, I don't want to presume anything like that, but if we had that kind of a power to do it, would we do it as well? I hope we would, right? But Jesus did not see it as an interruption, but he saw it as a chance to show mercy to a family in need. And think about it. Think about the impression that made to this Jewish man in charge of the synagogue. Wow. Think about that as well. Jesus arose to go with the grieving man to his home. Jesus knew that sometimes interruptions were divine appointments. Talked about divine appointments earlier, right? Let's finish up. Oh, this is some good stuff. Last one is Jesus' power. Number 4. Who has that one? Oh, wait a minute. We did that already.
Yes.
Excuse me. I got off track.
That's okay.
He also healed a woman, by the way, too, that was bleeding. And she touched him with his garment during this time frame also. He knew, by the way, he knew that she was there. And he said, "Who touched me?" Because he wanted her to come forward, and her faith made her well as well. And she did that. He did that on purpose to know who she was.
That's important. Faith.
There's all these attesting miracles. It's such a neat thing to see. These miracles that happened. It showed his mercy, through his word, through his touch. That he always makes time for the people that were in need. He helped the woman with the bleeding condition. He helped Jairus' family. Do you think he'll help us as well?
Yes.
Of course he will. Of course he does. Let's look at our 4 main points here that we talked about. The summary here it says first one is we can trust that Jesus came to offer salvation to sinners, right? We can also, number 2, rejoice in the truth that salvation is not based on religious works or rituals. And third one is we can know that Jesus cares and will respond to our needs. And the last one is we can trust that Jesus has the power to transform our lives. And that's the key right there to all that. He does, doesn't he? And he shows that mercy. We need to be reflecting Jesus to the world. When we see people that need mercy extended to them, we have the opportunity to do that. We need to do that. If they ask us why, we need to tell them why. Because Jesus extended mercy to me. And I want you to know about it. That's the perfect time to tell people, to share people. Any other questions or comments before we stop? They rang the bell. I guess. No? Okay. Great lesson. Great material. I love this, how Matthew lays this all out like that for us. It's really, really interesting to see. Let's have a word of prayer. Thank you, God, so much for the mercy that you extended to us, Lord. Even though we don't deserve it, Lord, you still gave it, Lord. And how you show us over and over in your word, Lord. I just pray that you'd encourage us also to be merciful to others, Lord, in that same kind of spirit. To reflect Christ to a world that's in the darkness of sin right now. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
Good lesson.
This
Thank
is
you.
Grace Baptist Church Adult One Bible Study. I think I forgot to say that first. Thank you for being here today, online and in the classroom. And just pray that you'd stand by in the next hour. Pastor Matthew will be leading us in a time of worship. God bless you all.
we know if the bathrooms are